I still remember the early morning light that gently filtered through the curtains, casting a soft glow on my face as I prepared for the day that was meant to change my life forever. My name is John, and today I was to marry Emily, a woman whose beauty and charm had captivated me from the moment we met. Every detail of our wedding had been meticulously planned, from the elegant floral arrangements to the carefully selected music that set a romantic tone. I believed that on this day, nothing could go wrong, that the promises of love and devotion would remain unchallenged. As I got dressed in my tailored suit, my thoughts swirled between excitement and a strange undercurrent of unease that I couldn't quite pinpoint. I reminded myself that weddings were stressful, that nerves were natural. Still, a small voice in the back of my mind whispered that something was off. I tried to dismiss it as a product of pre-wedding jitters and focused on the joy of the moment. Today was our day, and I intended to savor every minute. At the venue, a breathtaking estate nestled on the outskirts of town, everything seemed to embody perfection. The manicured gardens, the historic chapel with its stained glass windows, and the guests gathered in anticipation all created an atmosphere of idyllic celebration. As I awaited Emily's arrival, I noticed subtle details that, at the time, I rationalized away. A fleeting glance between Emily and a man I later learned was named Michael, a distant acquaintance from a business seminar months before, sent a ripple of uncertainty through me. Yet, I clung to the belief that our love was strong enough to silence any minor anomaly. Emily arrived in a flowing white dress that accentuated her grace. Her smile was radiant as she walked down the aisle, and for a moment, all my doubts melted away. I listened intently as the officiant recited our vows, pledging eternal commitment and unwavering love. In that sacred exchange, I promised to cherish her through every joy and sorrow. I was determined to overlook any imperfection, even if it came in the form of an unguarded glance or a whispered phone call. As the ceremony concluded, I felt an overwhelming sense of euphoria mixed with a strange disquiet that I couldn't shake. The guests cheered as we sealed our vows with a kiss, and the first hints of celebration began to permeate the air. I resolved to enjoy the day and dismiss the nagging feeling as nothing more than a trick of the mind. Little did I know that the cracks in the facade of our perfect wedding had already begun to form. During the cocktail hour, I tried to focus on the happy chatter around me, congratulatory remarks, and the clinking of glasses. However, my eyes repeatedly sought out Emily's face, searching for any sign that she was as content as she appeared. I noticed that despite the laughter and joyful conversation, there were moments when her expression grew distant, a fleeting sadness or distraction that she quickly masked with a smile. I tried to tell myself that the stress of the day was simply taking its toll on her, but an ominous feeling began to root itself in my heart. I found myself recalling fragments of conversations from the previous days, a whispered remark, a secretive phone call, and the way her eyes would sometimes linger on Michael when she thought I wasn't looking. I attempted to attribute these to the chaos of wedding preparations, convincing myself that my mind was merely playing tricks on me. Yet, as the day progressed, those subtle signs multiplied, and the illusion of perfection began to crack. That evening, as the reception was in full swing with heartfelt speeches and joyous dancing, I sensed that the evening was not unfolding as it should. The vibrant atmosphere contrasted with an inner turmoil I felt growing stronger with every passing minute. I watched as Emily excused herself briefly, stepping away from the group to take a call in a secluded corner. Her tone was hushed and urgent, a stark contrast to her earlier poise. At that moment, I realized that perhaps I was witnessing the beginnings of something much darker than mere pre-wedding anxiety. Surrounded by friends and family, I struggled with the need to maintain a cheerful facade. Every smile I offered was a mask, concealing the storm of doubt that raged within. In my heart, I knew that our day was meant to symbolize a union of love and trust. Yet, as the shadows lengthened and the party roared on, the seeds of betrayal were being sown silently beneath the surface. I clung to the hope that my suspicions were unfounded, that the complexities of human behavior could be misunderstood on such an emotionally charged day. I spent the remainder of the reception oscillating between the euphoria of celebration and the growing dread of impending betrayal. The sounds of laughter, the clamor of toasts, and the vibrant music began to blur into a cacophony that contrasted sharply with the quiet alarm inside me. In that liminal space between joy and suspicion, I felt increasingly isolated, as if I were the only one aware of a truth too painful to confront. My heart was heavy with the realization that the person I loved might harbor secrets that could shatter the very foundation of our union. As I closed my eyes for a fleeting moment, I prayed that my fears were unfounded, that the dazzling illusion of our perfect wedding would prevail over the dark omens I had sensed all day. But in the silence of that internal plea, the first hints of betrayal had already begun to etch themselves into the fabric of the day. The perfect veneer was now tainted by an undercurrent of deceit that would soon force me to confront a painful reality, one that would change everything I believed about love and trust. After the initial whirlwind of ceremonies, the reception hall buzzed with an air of celebration that felt both jubilant and surreal. The chandeliers sparkled above as guests mingled, and the soft hum of conversation filled the space. I tried to immerse myself in the festivities, but every passing moment seemed to amplify the nagging doubts that had taken root during the earlier hours. I watched Emily as she floated through the crowd, laughing at jokes and exchanging pleasantries. Yet, her laughter sometimes sounded hollow, as if she were reciting lines from a script rather than living the moment. There were brief instances when her gaze would wander off into the distance, and I couldn't help but wonder what thoughts were flickering behind her eyes. Each time I caught her looking away, my imagination conjured up images of clandestine meetings and whispered secrets. A turning point came during the mid-evening toast. Surrounded by our closest friends, I shared memories of our early days together, speaking of promises made and dreams yet to be fulfilled. As I spoke, I stole glances at Emily, hoping to find reassurance in her eyes. Instead, I noticed that her attention seemed divided. There was a peculiar stiffness in her posture whenever Michael appeared in the background, and a subtle, almost imperceptible tension crept into her smile. I found myself unable to focus on the pleasant words I was speaking, as my mind was gripped by an all-consuming anxiety. The conversation around me blurred as I began to piece together the small inconsistencies that had accumulated over the course of the day. Emily's discreet phone calls, her furtive conversations with Michael, and the way she would quickly change the subject whenever I approached her with a question. Each detail built a narrative of deception that I could no longer ignore. It was as though a dark thread had been woven into the fabric of our union, and every interaction seemed to tighten that thread until it was on the verge of snapping. The turning point of the evening came unexpectedly. While wandering away from the main area in search of a quiet moment to gather my thoughts, I found myself near a secluded part of the venue where the ambient noise of the celebration faded into a murmur. There, I caught sight of Emily, her back turned as she engaged in a hushed conversation with Michael. The sight of them standing so close together, speaking in low, urgent tones, sent a shockwave through my heart. In that moment, the subtle hints that had haunted me all day coalesced into a stark and undeniable reality. I stood there, frozen, watching as Michael's hand rested gently on Emily's arm, a gesture that carried a weight of intimacy far beyond that of a simple acquaintance. The whispered words they exchanged were lost to the ambient sounds of the night, but the body language was unmistakable. I felt a surge of anger and betrayal coursing through my veins. The person I had vowed to love with all my heart was now entwined in a secret that cut me to the core. Torn between the desire to confront them immediately and the need to preserve some semblance of decorum in front of our guests, I retreated into the shadows. Every step away from that painful scene felt like a descent into a deeper darkness. My mind raced with questions. Had Emily been planning this betrayal long before today? Was I simply a convenient placeholder in someone else's twisted narrative? The answers eluded me, buried beneath layers of denial and heartbreak. I returned to the reception with a heavy heart, wearing a forced smile as I continued to participate in the festivities. Yet, every laugh and every congratulatory handshake felt tainted by the bitter knowledge of what I had witnessed. I found myself trapped in a limbo of conflicting emotions, the desperate hope that maybe it was all a misunderstanding, and the grim acceptance that my worst fears were coming to life before my eyes. As the night deepened, I attempted to distract myself by engaging in conversation with our guests, recounting humorous anecdotes and trying to maintain the illusion that everything was normal. However, the image of Emily and Michael, huddled together away from the celebration, would not leave my mind. The vibrant energy of the reception was overshadowed by the weight of betrayal, and every smile from Emily now felt like a carefully constructed facade masking a hidden truth. In the quiet moments between dancing and toasts, I retreated further into my thoughts. I began to reconstruct the events of the day in my mind, the subtle signals, the unexplained pauses, the fleeting glances that I had once dismissed as nerves. Now, each detail was charged with meaning, a silent confession of deceit that I could no longer ignore. The wedding, which was meant to mark the beginning of a joyous journey together, had transformed into a crucible of heartbreak. In that suspended moment of introspection, I realized that the truth was something I could no longer delay. The pain of betrayal was already too deep to be ignored, and the weight of unspoken secrets threatened to consume me entirely. The shimmering illusion of happiness that had greeted me that morning was now replaced by a stark reality, a reality in which the love I had cherished was entwined with lies, and every promise seemed to crumble before my eyes. The night carried on, but for me, the celebration had lost its luster. With each passing minute, the distance between who I thought Emily was and the person I now saw became insurmountable. My heart felt heavy with the burden of shattered trust, and I knew that by the time the night was over, I would be forced to confront the painful truth that lay at the heart of our union. The shadows of suspicion had become impossible to ignore, and I was left to wonder whether the future held any promise of healing or merely the continuation of a deep, unyielding betrayal. The final hours of the reception arrived like a slow, torturous descent into darkness. I moved through the crowd with a numb determination, my mind replaying every moment that had led to this point. The once celebratory atmosphere had given way to a silent reckoning, a mounting tension that no amount of forced smiles could disguise. I knew that sooner or later, I would have to confront Emily about what I had witnessed. The question that haunted me was not just about the betrayal itself, but about who she truly was, and whether the love I had given so freely was nothing more than an illusion. I searched for her in the dim light of the reception hall, my eyes scanning every corner of the room as if willing her to appear and confirm the truth that had shattered me. Finally, in a quiet corner away from the lingering chatter of our guests, I found her alone. Her back was turned to me, and for a long moment, I hesitated. I could see the tension in her shoulders, the way her hands trembled ever so slightly. The sight of her alone evoked memories of our happier times, a bittersweet reminder of the trust we once shared. With a steadying breath, I approached her. "Emily," I said softly, my voice betraying none of the storm that raged within me. She turned, and I saw a flash of guilt in her eyes, an expression that was gone as quickly as it appeared, replaced by something that I could neither name nor comprehend. For a moment, the room fell silent around us, as if the very air held its breath in anticipation of what was about to unfold. "John," she replied, her tone carefully measured, yet laced with an emotion I couldn't quite decipher. I searched her face for answers, for a glimpse of the woman I had once loved so dearly. "I need to know," I continued, unable to keep the trembling in my voice at bay. "What happened? Why did you do this?" I didn't just mean the act itself, but the countless moments of secrecy and the quiet lies that had built up over time. Her eyes darted away for a moment before returning to meet mine. "John, she began, faltering as words that I hoped would offer an explanation died on her lips. The silence that followed was heavy and filled with the echoes of our shattered promises. I could feel my heart pounding, each beat a reminder of the love I had once believed was unbreakable. The raw vulnerability in the air was almost too much to bear. Finally, she spoke in a voice that was barely audible. "I never meant to hurt you. It just happened." Michael was there, and one thing led to another. Her words were simple, lacking any justification, and they hung between us like a bitter aftertaste. I felt as if the ground had been ripped from beneath me. Every laugh, every touch, every whispered promise of forever was suddenly tainted by the knowledge of her betrayal. The pain surged inside me like a tidal wave. One thing led to another? I repeated, the phrase sounding hollow in the stillness of that moment. Was I just a convenience? Was our entire relationship nothing but a beautiful lie? I struggled to maintain control, my voice quivering with anguish. My mind was a whirlwind of memories, moments of tenderness now intermingled with the sting of deceit. Emily's eyes filled with tears as she tried to explain further. "I was confused, John. I never meant for any of this to happen, but Her words dissolved into a stream of regret and half-formed explanations. I could see that she was hurting, but the pain I felt was far deeper, a searing betrayal that had struck at the very core of my being. For what felt like an eternity, we stood there, locked in a painful silence. The surrounding noise of the reception faded away, leaving only the echo of my broken heart and the weight of her confession. I wanted to lash out, to demand answers that would bring me closure, yet every word felt inadequate in the face of such profound hurt. Finally, I managed to speak, my voice low and resolute. "I trusted you, Emily. I gave you my heart, my future, and you shattered it." My words were not shouted, they were measured, a reflection of the deep sadness that now defined me. I knew that the confrontation would not mend the broken pieces of our relationship. Rather, it was the painful necessity of facing the truth head-on. In that moment, standing in the half-light of a reception that had once promised joy, I realized that our wedding day had become the turning point of my life, a day when the illusions of love and perfection crumbled into dust. I could no longer pretend that the betrayal was a mistake, that our future could be salvaged with apologies and regret. The path ahead was shrouded in uncertainty, and I had no choice but to walk away from the remnants of a love that had betrayed me. With one final, pained glance at Emily, a woman who had once been my beacon of hope, I turned and walked away into the night. The sound of my footsteps echoed in the silent hall, marking the end of a chapter that I would carry with me as both a lesson and a wound that might one day heal. In the days that followed our fateful wedding, I found myself living in a limbo of disbelief and sorrow. The celebrations had long ended, yet the memories of that day were etched into every corner of my mind, each recollection a painful reminder of the betrayal that had shattered my world. I wandered through the empty rooms of our once shared home, trying to make sense of the ruins that lay scattered before me. The echo of every laugh, every touch, haunted me like a ghost from a past that no longer existed. In the quiet solitude of those early mornings, I began to process the weight of my loss. I spent hours alone with my thoughts, replaying the events of the wedding day, questioning every moment, every smile that had deceived me. The hurt was immense, but amid the wreckage of shattered dreams, I gradually began to see the outlines of a new beginning. I had to find a way to rebuild my life, piece by piece, despite the lingering scars of betrayal. Therapy sessions, long walks under the gray sky, and countless sleepless nights became my new reality. I sought solace in writing, pouring out my anguish onto paper in a desperate attempt to transform my pain into something tangible. Each word became a step toward reclaiming the parts of me that had been lost on that terrible day. I realized that while the memory of betrayal would always be a part of my story, it did not have to define my future. In quiet moments of reflection, I began to see that the betrayal, as devastating as it was, had forced me to confront a painful truth about the nature of trust and the fragility of love. It was not merely about the act itself, but about the loss of innocence and the shattering of an ideal that I had so naively believed would last forever. I mourned the death of the perfect wedding day, the end of a dream that had once seemed so real. Yet, in that morning, I discovered a reservoir of strength, a quiet resilience that promised a chance at renewal. I reached out to friends and family, those who had offered support during the chaos of the wedding and in the days after. Their kindness and unwavering belief in my worth helped me begin to piece together a future that was not defined by the actions of another. I learned that healing was not linear. It came in fits and starts, with moments of despair intermingled with flashes of hope. Slowly, I started to reclaim my identity, rediscovering passions and dreams that had lain dormant beneath the shadow of my heartbreak. In conversations with those who cared for me, I often heard the sentiment that true betrayal was not simply an act of infidelity, but a violation of trust, the trust that one places in another with the hope of building a shared future. I realized that while Emily's actions had torn our lives apart, they had also given me an opportunity to reflect on my own self-worth. I began to understand that love, in its truest form, should never come at the cost of losing oneself. Time passed, and with it came a gradual softening of the pain. The wedding day remained a bitter chapter in my life, a day when I was forced to confront the darkness hidden behind a veneer of perfection. But it also became a catalyst for growth, a painful yet transformative experience that reshaped my understanding of love, trust, and resilience. I found myself slowly letting go of the anger, replacing it with a cautious optimism that I could someday find happiness again. The road to healing was long and fraught with setbacks, yet I began to see that every step forward was a victory in itself. I learned to cherish the memories of who I once was without letting them define who I would become. With each passing day, I rediscovered parts of myself that had been overshadowed by the weight of betrayal. I began to write new chapters, ones filled with hope, self-respect, and the determination to build a future based on honesty and mutual care. In the end, the wedding that had once symbolized the pinnacle of my dreams had transformed into a painful reminder of how fragile human connections can be. Yet, through the pain, I emerged with a deeper understanding of life's complexities. I now carry the scars of that day not as marks of defeat, but as symbols of survival, a testament to the fact that even in the face of profound betrayal, there remains a spark of resilience that can ignite the path to healing. Standing on the precipice of a new dawn, I embraced the future with a cautious heart and a spirit that, though wounded, was determined to rise again. The memory of that fateful wedding would always be with me, a reminder that love and betrayal often walk hand in hand. But I had learned that it was up to me to choose whether to dwell in the past or forge a brighter future. And so, I stepped forward, carrying with me the lessons of yesterday, ready to embrace a tomorrow that held the promise of renewal, redemption, and, eventually, peace.